The anatomy of shared moments, dissolving boundaries. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into those quiet, atmospheric shifts that completely transform human connections. We're looking at a truly fascinating source narrative that explores the absolute limits of love, the lingering echoes of grief, and the beautifully complex nature of unconventional relationships. We're going to unpack exactly how deeply established personal boundaries can just dissolve, not through force, but through a slow magnetic pull.
So, our narrative today centers on a deeply personal account of a 55-year-old widow. Picture this. She steps into the quiet, rhythmic home of her best friend, Caroline, and Caroline's fiancé, Marcus. Think about the sheer psychological leap it takes to step into a new environment like that at her age. You arrive assuming your life's trajectory is totally set, only to find the traditional rules of a household, and honestly, of love itself, being systematically rewritten right in front of you. You know, intimacy isn't always built through those massive, cinematic, grand gestures you see in movies. Actually, more often than not, it's built through micro moments. We're going to analyze the exact emotional mechanisms at play in this highly unusual dynamic, looking at how tiny, seemingly invisible interactions just stack up until the entire architectural structure of a relationship changes. Okay, let's dive into this timeline, because boundaries don't fall all at once. They dissolve chronologically through escalating interactions. We'll start at the dinner table, move out to the yard for a wood chopping lesson, transition to a quiet porch, and finally reach a profound emotional climax at a stone fire pit. Each step builds an undeniable, almost heavy momentum.
To really grasp this progression, we have to look at the concept of the micro moment. It's a brief, seemingly ordinary interaction that fundamentally shifts the emotional dynamic between people. So the first crucial micro moment in our source occurs at dinner. Marcus doesn't just make your standard small talk. He leans in. He asks highly specific questions about the narrator's past travels, like her time in Istanbul or living on a boat. It's that kind of intense listening that completely disarms you, making you feel deeply recognized when you thought you were, simply moving through the background.
Marcus looks right at her and notes that while most people just move through life, she has truly lived it. Wow. It's a statement that creates an instant web of verbal intimacy. And all the while, Caroline deliberately encourages the narrator to share these stories, filling all 3 wine glasses to the absolute brim. In that thick, heavy silence of the room, a shared, unnamed gaze passes between the 3 of them. It's no longer just a conversation. It is the quiet cementing of a brand new, unspoken trio. Sensory anchoring and physical tension. Words build the foundation, right? But physical proximity anchors those words into a stark reality. During a woodchopping lesson in the yard, the physical tension reaches a breaking point. Marcus steps behind her to adjust her stance. The whole scene is suspended in overwhelming sensory details, the sharp smell of sawdust, the heat of clean sweat, and the literal grounding weight of his hands resting on her hips. But actually, scratch that. The true tension isn't in the contact itself. The true, suffocating psychological tension lives in the mere 2 inches of empty air between her back and his chest. 2 inches. It is a masterfully restrained moment. How often does society condition us to believe that romance and age are somehow mutually exclusive? The sudden physical proximity radically challenges the narrator's ingrained beliefs about herself. She keeps repeating this internal sentiment, I'm 55, I've had a life. In her mind, a widow's romantic and sensual chapters are definitively, absolutely closed. She views her life entirely in the past tense. But the undeniable physical reality of that wood-chopping scene insists stubbornly on the present tense. Contrasting philosophies of love. The central friction in this narrative comes from 2 entirely opposed worldviews. It's fascinating. The narrator operates on a finite model of love. She genuinely believes she used up her allotted capacity for romantic love on her late husband, David, like a tank running on empty. Caroline, however, operates on an infinite model. She approaches love fearlessly. She views this sparking connection between her fiancé and her best friend not as a threat, and definitely not as a betrayal, but as a beautiful, necessary expansion of love. A real game changer. And Caroline doesn't just passively observe this happening. She actively orchestrates the dissolution of these household boundaries with the subtle brilliance of a conductor. She doesn't force anything. Rather, she literally creates vacuums for them to fill. She suggests Marcus take the narrator to see wild roses on the property line. She sits with her shelling peas on the porch to create a safe space for open, vulnerable talk. She purposefully falls asleep during evening readings,
leaving Marcus and the narrator alone in the soft lamplight. She transforms the absolute most mundane household routines into powerful tools for dismantling those boundaries.
Redefining household rules. So, as the traditional expected dynamic dissolves, it isn't just replaced by chaos. Instead, new, entirely unspoken rules immediately emerge to maintain the fragile ecosystem of this household. They are never alone behind closed doors. Touch becomes rationed like something incredibly precious. A quick hand on a shoulder passing a chair, brushing fingers at the breadbasket, a supportive palm on the lower back guiding you down a rocky path to the creek. Why does this dynamic work so well? Well, because by restricting physical contact to these fleeting, mundane moments, it transforms an everyday action into a profound event, paradoxically amplifying the intense intimacy between them.
But human conditioning is incredibly strong, you know? Standing out on the porch at night, enveloped in the heavy, overwhelming scent of wild lavender, the narrator constantly wrestles with this new reality. She looks at the life she knew versus the life she is suddenly in, and asks, is this madness? Are we crazy?
Caroline counters this doubt perfectly. Or maybe we've all been living too small. It's a profound psychological theory. What if the madness isn't expanding our capacity for love, but rather that our traditional, constrained boundaries have been severely limiting our deepest capacity for human connection all along? Awakening in grief at 55.
This brings us to the intersection of grief, rebirth, and the profound vulnerability of allowing yourself to be truly seen again. While Marcus reads poetry in the lamplight one quiet evening, the narrator finally opens up about her late husband, David. She shares the most intimate, painful fragments of her loss. His loud laugh, his absolutely terrible cooking, the secret notes he used to leave tucked inside her books, and the shattering, heartbreaking morning in the hospital when she woke up entirely alone. By sharing this, she brings her past grief directly into the bright light of her present awakening.
Marcus's response is just pure empathy. As his thumb traces a slow, deliberate circle right over the jumping pulse on her wrist, he completely reframes her grief. He tells her, "You're not starting over, you're just continuing." It is such a vital validation. It means her capacity to love, her very essence, wasn't buried in the ground with her husband. All of this slowly building tension perfectly sets up the defining climax of the narrative. It happens under thick, salt-like stars by a stone fire pit. The three of them are passing whiskey without glasses. The physical heat of the fire competes fiercely with the heat of their proximity. When Marcus moves to sit beside the narrator, their smallest fingers barely touch. But out there in the cool night air, that single point of contact acts as an undeniable, literal electrical current. In this deeply vulnerable space, Marcus openly admits his own emotional awakening. Looking through the smoke and flame, he tells her he hasn't felt this awake in years. It confirms that this dissolving of boundaries is mutually transformative. He's discovering dormant parts of himself just as much as she is. And remarkably, Carolyn watches this entire exchange across the fire with absolute joy. Her joy is the ultimate proof that the boundaries have successfully and safely dissolved. It's the living validation of her whole philosophy. Love truly is an expansion, not a finite resource. Redefining boundaries and peeling away the safety nets of what we're supposed to do ultimately leaves us standing right at a precipice. It forces a fundamental choice between the familiar, finite safety of the past and the thrilling, infinite uncertainty of a newly expanded future. As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with the narrator's ultimate dilemma. Feeling the tight grip of Marcus's hand? When the boundaries dissolve, when the rules are fundamentally rewritten, and love is offered in a way you never, ever expected, do you retreat to the safety of what you know? Or do you take the jump, not knowing if you'll fall or if you'll fly? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable narrative with us. Keep questioning your boundaries, and we'll see you in the next explainer.